Hey, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I am super excited about our topic today and our guest today. And the way that I was thinking about it was thinking about our clients checking into a hotel and what goes through our minds, but then what goes on in the actual hotel or destination that they're taken in. So, a lot of times we have clients check into hotels and nothing really happens. There's no upgrade, there's no note, there's no recognition. And we're sitting home on our end thinking, okay, I did what people told me to do. What went wrong? Because on paper, we did the steps and we feel like we did everything right. And so I think that sometimes in our industry, there can be a disconnect. As advisors, we're taught what to expect from hotels, but we're not always taught how hotels are actually making decisions behind the scenes. So today's conversation is a really good one. I'm joined by Alexandra Hepworth, and she has over 20 years in the tourism industry, including 7 years as a director of sales and marketing for luxury hotels. And now she works on the advisor side. So she's seen all sides, which is super helpful. And she knows how hotels think. She knows how they evaluate advisors, what actually matters internally. So we're going to get into what hotels wish advisors understood and perhaps how small shifts in how you show up can completely change your client experience. So, Alexandra, thank you so much for being here and for being a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to dive into this conversation. I think you're going to just drop some knowledge for all of us. And let's kind of start with where you're at now, but also a little bit of how you got here. Because, like I mentioned in my intro, you've been in this industry a long time, but you've been in it in different capacities, which I feel is such a wealth of knowledge. So share with us kind of where you're at now, but also how you got here and your kind of journey in the tourism industry.
Sure, no problem. So I will definitely try my elevator pitch of this journey because it is quite a long one. So my career really started after I went on a typical Brits backpacking trip to Australia that was supposed to last 3 months and ended up lasting a year. And I traveled and worked my way around, came back home through Thailand, and pretty much got home. And my dad said something along the lines of, "All you do is talk about Australia. I really wish someone would pay you for that." And I got this sort of light bulb moment and applied for a job at that time in a bricks and mortar travel agency in Manchester that was specializing in selling tailor-made holidays to Australia and New Zealand. Got the job, no sales experience whatsoever. And yeah, sat in that store and had lines outside the door because it was a very popular time for Australia and just booking travel physically. And I was in that job for about a year and a half. Then I moved to London and I worked for a representation company. So sales and business development for the Tourism Tasmania account and different luxury hotels and resorts in Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji, actually. And I was in charge of the UK and Europe. So it was a lot of sitting on trains, going to train travel advisors, educating, and also doing, gaining extra visibility for our clients in brochures at the time and on websites and all that sort of thing. I then moved to the Australian Tourist Board. So I was with Tourism Australia for 2 years in partnership marketing. So again, working alongside travel agency owners and travel advisors, also leading a lot of fan trips to Australia. I'm very lucky that I've been back there a lot of times. And that was a great role to, broaden the view on the industry. Fast forward to 2011, which now seems a long time ago, which it is. And some contacts that I'd made through my representation journey was an owner of a DMC in Indochina. And he approached me at a trade show and said, "We're buying 6 boutique hotels, 5 in Vietnam, 1 in Cambodia. Would you come to Vietnam and work for us?" So, okay, sure. So I packed up the apartment that I had bought in London less than a year before. I got on a one-way flight to Vietnam for what was supposed to be a 2-year contract. And 9 years later, I was still there. So basically what happened during my time in Vietnam, I just loved Southeast Asia. It was an amazing place to live. I learned so much. I was thrown into a career where I really didn't have much experience and I had to learn on the fly. So during my time there, I was director of sales and marketing for hotels, but then actually I went onto the DMC side. So I was working for an Australian-owned DMC at that time, and we covered 10 countries in Asia, doing fixed group departures as well as independent FIT travel and that sort of thing. And I was in charge of international sales and special interest groups as well. So I handled, groups of 50 coming in, that sort of thing. After that, I went back on the hotel side. So I was the director of sales and marketing at a group level for wellness properties and resorts across Vietnam. And then I moved into city hotels, and that was amazing. And I was in the Caravel Saigon for nearly 4 years. And there I was in charge of sales, marketing, revenue, PR, events, reservations, you name it, anything commercial. That was me. And that was a real eye opener into the operational side of a hotel, because before that I hadn't been based on site. So I was a little bit removed from the end client and what was going on in the back end. 2020, I moved to Cambodia to work for Hyatt as a pre-opening DOSM for the Hyatt Regency in Phnom Penh. That was amazing. It was really building something from the ground up. I was staff number 2. I built the whole commercial team, strategy, built, all the storytelling around the property. It had a really good story. So that was a very, very nice project to work on. But timing, it was COVID. We were delayed opening, a lot of things happened. And during that time, I met my now husband, who is from Colombia. So this is where there's a huge shift in life. And in 2021, we came to Bogota on what was supposed to be a 2-week holiday. And I am still sitting here in March 2026. So that's pretty much the story of the pivot back to where I started pretty much. I found myself in a country where I didn't speak a word of the language. There is not much English here at all. Colombia, yes. Bogota, not so much. No. I was completely unemployable. It's the end of COVID, all these things happening. So I studied digital marketing with Cornell University for a year remotely. And then through some contacts I had, actually an agency owner who I had hosted on a fam trip in Vietnam back in 2017. She had put something out on Instagram that she couldn't handle all the influx of new inquiry after COVID and, that sort of thing. And I just sort of put my hand up and said, well, I'm not doing anything and I've got hands if you need some. And she said, have you thought about being on the advisor side of the industry? And I was like, well, I started that way, sure. So that's kind of how I got back onto this side, and slowly I built a portfolio of luxury clients, very much word of mouth, very slowly, because I'm not based anywhere where my clients are. My clients are all pretty much East Coast of the US. And a few in Latin America. And in 2024, I spent 6 months, I decided to step out of the agency model and really go out on my own. So I spent 6 months building a brand in the background with a company that know me personally, someone that I know from Vietnam. So I really wanted that kind of personal side of it. So I spent 6 months building the brand, doing the whole marketing strategy, everything. And I've been running my own agency now for about 18 months. So and that's
cool.
the story.
You are not lying. Yeah, you have covered it all. You have done it all. Yeah. And honestly, even just hearing all of that, which I didn't even know half of it, I would say we could take this conversation in like 17 different directions, and you would probably be able to. So I would have to just hold myself on like one specific time. Really, really cool that you have been able to see the industry from so many different sides and through the longevity, right? Because it has changed and it has evolved and it has grown in so many different ways over the years. And so that's really cool and interesting. But to focus our time today, I think what I was most interested in kind of having a conversation and also giving advisors a little bit of a sneak peek behind the curtain, because there are so many times where we enter into relationships, and this industry is built on relationships, right? Definitely. So we have these relationships, or we're trying to build these relationships, and we're trying to do right by our clients and give them the best experience possible. And we think we know what we're doing. And maybe sometimes just don't know the full picture. So today, I thought it would be so interesting to just talk about what luxury hotels wish travel advisors understood. And who better than somebody who knows both what it is to be an advisor, but also what it is to work in the hotel space and really kind of see that angle of it. And so before we get into upgrades and VIP treatments and all those kind of really important things, I want to just kind of have a broad understanding of how hotels see advisors in the first place and start there, because I think we as I'm speaking for myself as advisors assume we know how hotels see us, but we might be wrong, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and you're absolutely right that it has evolved over time. And so when I first went into hotels, distribution was very different. And what I mean by that is, the way people found hotels was traditionally through travel agents and travel advisors. And so the travel agent advisor model, including wholesale and DMCs, they took a huge chunk of the market, and they controlled a lot more than they probably do now. So at that time, advisors were king. DMCs were king, all those things where we all fit within the industry. We had a lot of buying power and we made a lot of noise, and people sat back and said, oh, we need to really, pay attention here. I think in the last, few years, and especially as, things have changed and evolved and people doing things themselves, that market segmentation has shifted. And so now, where hotels may have had 3 or 4 key segments only, now they might have 20. I mean, you're now sort of talking about advisors booking through consortia, DMCs having advisors on the end of it. So that's already, 2 channels that merge into one, but not really. You've then got things coming directly through property websites, which is what they want, because obviously they can definitely control the client experience better. It's a better margin for them, all those sorts of revenue things that go on in the background. You've then got loyalty program guests, things like that we don't often think about because we're really focused in our own lane. And we're very lucky, I think, that we do have sales teams and sales managers that their only focus is us. And that's amazing. And they're the ones that make us feel that we're really being looked after, and we are, and especially at a global level, we are. When it comes to property level, that's when it can get a bit complex, because you've got different departments pulling and pushing in all different ways. We've got sales teams telling operations, we need to prioritize this booking and this one, and I need an upgrade here. And, I'm getting into the next question probably now, but just so that we understand how it's going on, and then understanding if those other departments actually are aware of who the people are, or who the advisors are, or who their consortia is, because I think it's a lot of internal education that is required, because once sales have been done, sales pretty much takes their hands off and passes to operations. So operations is the one that's actually in charge of your guest experience, not the salesperson who helped you find the right room type and all those sorts of things. So it's really that cross-department communication that needs to happen, and that needs to come internal, so that, everybody is on the same page when that person walks through the door.
Yeah. So there's not the one thing you have to worry about. You're telling me there's more.
Maybe, could be. I'm trying to make it not sound too complicated, but when you've been in the background, it can be a little bit different.
There's a lot of different moving parts. So is there anything that you could point to that would be like, okay, this advisor can stand out, or will stand out, or will just be noticed even, versus just another booking coming through? Is that due to volume or consistency or the client profile? Like, is there any kind of like metric maybe, or signals that actually really matter?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a few things. I think one thing that we also need to remember is that when bookings come through to the hotels, it's coming from your host agency. It's not coming from you as the advisor. So that's one thing to remember, is that whatever your consortia or host agency is, that's how they're seeing the bookings. So where you have an advantage is that your host agency likely has a lot of volume with that property. So you're already up there, on the VIP lists in terms of, yes, this booking has virtuoso benefits. So we know already that it's more important than one that came through another channel at a promotional rate that's non-refundable, for example. So we're already higher in the queue, for those sorts of things. But I do also think that, it's really important for advisors to build relationships with properties at multiple levels, because, sales team is one thing, knowing who you are. Reservations is another one. And we need to know at certain times who to go to as well. Because sometimes when we have got something that's maybe complex, or we really do have a client that does have special needs, or we really need to flag them because they are somebody, going to reservations might not be the best avenue, because you need to be going to someone who can talk at the higher end of the operations team to make sure that all of that happens. So I think that having relationships with certain properties, booking more than once, is always a really good thing as well. And I think as advisors, it's more beneficial for us to find our key partners and our allies as well, and then it works both ways. We don't want to be booking, researching and booking 500 different hotels all the time. It also makes a lot of sense for us that we start building relationships where we know those properties are going to deliver for our clients and they are the right profile for our clients as well. So that's also something on the advisor side that we can do. And then it really comes down to, softly. And we really need to remember that not everybody's a VIP. I think that's a big mistake that we all make, because also I think in the industry we're taught, VIP your client. And I think that phrasing already is probably the wrong way to do it. It's like flag your client, or, acknowledge your client, or, and I have absolutely no problem with telling a property that, we've made a booking. We all want to celebrate. We all want them to know that we've made a booking, especially if it's coming through the host agency. And that's fabulous. But we really have to, make sure that we're strategic when we're really asking for something more than, can you please add the client to the priority wait list for upgrade, or for upgrade subject to availability on arrival? We all know that is what the phrasing is anyway. And we can get into that, as well as how advisors communicate that to clients, because that's another thing. But I do think that, we really have to be, when we need something, we need to be asking for the right client as well, and the right person. And when the hotel delivers, that not only makes you look like a rock star, but it also cements that relationship with the property. And I think the last thing I would probably say on that as well is say thank you. We push a lot in the front end to get things to happen before clients arrive, and the client calls us and says, wow, this is amazing, and we got the best view and a great upgrade and whatever, and we sit and we go, awesome, it worked. And sometimes we fail to write to all the people that we had involved on the other side that actually executed that for us and made the client feel very special. And I think that's one step that we sometimes forget.
Yes, you're so right about that. You are so right about that. I think it is very easy to kind of even just look back and see, like, you do all the work on the front end and you do the asking and you get the feedback when it goes well and it goes right, and your clients are just over the moon because what happened. And then you just go on because you're like, yes,
exactly.
you celebrate. Yeah, the thank you back. It kind of closes a loop of like, I noticed, I recognize, I appreciate, and that probably sticks out so much, because it's the same for us, right? It's like when we do something on behalf of our clients and we work so hard, and they come back and acknowledge us when they get home from the trip and let us even know how well it turns out. It's like, well, man, thank you, because I did work really hard on it. It's really good to be acknowledged, versus like crickets and you're like, did you like it or not? So I understand how that goes both ways, for the relationship, and also just for just being kind and showing appreciation.
Exactly.
That is very. Okay, I want to do a little bit more talking about this idea of how upgrades work, what a VIP
Okay.
actually means, because you are so right. And it is very easy to just kind
Mm,
of like think this is what you're supposed to do. All of my clients are VIPs.
mm.
Every time they travel
Yeah.
to a hotel, it would be, all the
Yeah.
bells and whistles, your biggest upgrade, your best amenity, all for free. All of the things, right? And why
Yeah.
not ask for it? Like shoot for the
Hmm.
moon, and maybe you'll reach the stars or whatever the
For
phrase
sure.
is. But I think
Yeah.
let's bring a little bit of like reality to it, and also kind of like,
Mm,
hey, are we hurting ourselves by doing it that way?
mm.
And so
Yeah.
give us an idea of, you kind of talked about this, but I would love to
Mm.
understand a little bit better about like what determines who gets an upgrade. Like where's the hierarchy here? If they are
Yeah.
like, it's a virtuoso property, it's a, fine hotels and resorts with Amex, it's a on
Mhm.
this consortia, it's just because I asked and I booked direct. Like what are the things that we're thinking
Yeah.
about? Who determines and what determines actually
Mhm.
it's an upgrade?
Yeah. So yeah, look, it's a really interesting topic actually. So the way that I've experienced this working in both independent properties and in group properties, a lot of things happen quite close to when guests are going to arrive. So we can always flag clients for upgrades and that sort of thing as soon as we make the booking or whatever our process is. But because occupancy changes all the time and the properties are constantly getting bookings, it's very, very difficult to say what will happen until, a couple of days before, maybe even on the day of arrival, sometimes.
Okay.
So morning briefing every day in hotels. All the department heads tend to sit around the desk, and you'll go through the arrivals list of that day. And at that point, that's when I'm there sitting next to operations, so the director of rooms and me, or whatever the positions are. And they will go through the arrivals list, and we will be told if groups are coming in, if corporate clients are coming in, and who's actually on that VIP list. Now, that's when it's my job to cross correlate this with my sales team, first of all, before we go to the briefing, to make sure that anybody who needs to be flagged is flagged. And that's then when we'll go through all of those people, what their history is with the property. So they may have stayed 50 times, or, they may be a guest of, one of our top travel advisors, or they could be, I don't know, a corporate client, the managing director of a company coming to do a site inspection, all those different things that are happening when people come through the door. And that's then when, in terms of priority, when to upgrade, how to do that, and what's going on. So it's really about that kind of last minute shift from the property. And then that's when they go through the lists and say, they might come to sales and say, okay, this is what I've got in my hands. Who is the top priority for, for upgrade today? Based on the availability that we've got, the movements that we've got, because also sometimes what happens in-house is that guests want to extend their stay. So when you thought I had this room over here that I can turn around, and that's when housekeeping gets involved, because it's like, housekeeping, we need you to turn over this room in 2 hours and run, and then someone says, can I stay? Oh, so it's all these kind of moving parts that until you're actually through the door and at the front desk, sometimes it's not that easy. Now, there are some hotel groups that we know that they offer upgrade at the time of confirmation of booking. So sometimes if an advisor flags that booking within 24 hours, sometimes that can be done. That's quite a nice way for properties to be able to manage that. Because if they've already sold the next level up 6 months out, they're not then doing this kind of chess and jigsaw puzzle that goes on behind the scenes with that. So some groups I have seen have started to do that just because it makes their life easier at the other end. And then for us as advisors, we don't always have to tell our clients we've done that. That can be an element of surprise.
Yeah, it can
On
still be like,
arrival.
absolutely. I love when I'm able to like
Yeah.
know it in the back of my head, but
Yeah.
then like have it be a surprise for them. And everybody
Exactly.
wins. That's really great.
Yeah.
Okay. Something you mentioned that I want to just make sure
Mhm.
that I get your input on
Yeah.
is like the idea that everybody is not a VIP. And I want to know from like, even now you're on the advisor side, and when you're going
Mhm.
to hotels and you're saying, hey, this client is a VIP, or you're just deciding to say, hey, so-and-so is staying and they're celebrating their anniversary. Like, tell us kind of how to think through what those differences are in terms of what actually makes a VIP. Like, what does that mean both to you and to the hotel, and how to wisely, I guess, use that phrase, and
Sure.
what does it mean that you can ask for if they are a VIP?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Look, so I think what I would tend to say is that you look at this in two ways. One, in terms of um, maybe who the client thinks they are, because we have to manage a lot of personalities. So maybe three ways actually. If in your mind they are a VIP, that's the two things. I guess what room type they've booked as well. This is also something to think about, because a lot of the time, if someone's booking, a standard lead-in room category, from the hotel perspective, they're not a VIP, but if someone is dropping, a lot of money on larger suites and above or something like that, they're automatically a VIP from the hotel side as well. And that's when the hotels kick in with more amenities and that sort of thing from their side. We don't have to do anything about that, So I think it comes down to matching the hotel's expectation of a VIP to what your client is booking. If they are honeymooners or on their anniversary, or it's a special birthday or something like that, absolutely doesn't mean that they're VIP, but they are definitely worth flagging, because obviously those sorts of occasions will always, give the hotel some more motivation to make their stay very special on behalf of you and on behalf of the property. Now, the other consideration to make is whether the client is a VIP of your business. And what I mean by that is, are they a loyalty client of yours? So they might not be the highest spender, but they've come back to you 4, 5, 6 times. You always work on trips for them. They are your VIP in terms of what they bring to your business. Now, that is a person that I would push for, regardless of status in the property, because that's then saying, this is a loyal client of mine. And that's usually the way that I would word it to a property as well. This is a loyal client for mine. This client means something to me and my business. My business means something to your business because of the consortia I book through, or however. This is something that, let's work on as a team, and please help me to make my clients stay very special.
Yeah.
So those are the angles I would take on it.
I love that. I love that kind of just like shift in perspective slightly. And give me your opinion then. What is your either personal opinion, or, you just can go back like, oh my gosh, that drove me crazy. So I'm talking about notes, right? So we send VIP notes, so we want them printed in our, letterhead. We want them in the room. We are sending, an email to this person and a note for our client. What are your thoughts there? Or do you have any kind of like, I don't know, is this useful? Is it meaningless?
Look, this is actually quite an interesting one. So definitely, sending welcome notes and that sort of thing is great. It's usually something that is offered by virtuoso properties as well. So they are putting themselves in that position. Let's just put it that way. And again, different hotels do it different ways. I've seen clients have something printed on an A4 piece of paper, which, doesn't always look the most professional, but it is there. So, it has been done. Others are beautifully handwritten on, personalized cards from the property. I remember my GM's desk used to be a stack of cards like this every week, and he'd just sit there signing. So you're also putting, more pressure than you realize on operations teams. Because think about it this way. So you're sending that note to reservations or sales or however, that then needs to get to operations. Now they will either handwrite a card or they'll put it to a printing line or whatever they do. Then housekeeping, it's passed to housekeeping, and housekeeping needs to go and distribute all of these things all in time for when the clients arrive. And that's when I'm coming full circle back to upgrades on arrival and availability. If you've spent time having everybody set up a room for your clients and what have you, and then the hotel says, oh, but we can upgrade you, that client's going to end up in a room that has not one single amenity, no welcome card, no nothing. And someone else is going to go to their room and be, wow, this cake's amazing. And who's Brianna? But Sure,
Right.
she's nice, thanks. So there's so many moving parts. And and so we do all that work in the background. And again, we push the hotel and we ask them to help us, and they do. And then the client ends up in a completely different room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's always, swings and roundabouts with these sorts of things as to what works and how it happens. So
I
yeah.
totally get you. I mean, I've experienced it myself where, I get to a hotel and then I change rooms and then like,
Mm.
an hour or two later, they're coming by with like my bottle of champagne with the ice melted because it was sitting somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I mean,
Sorry.
at least they brought it to you. I mean, someone
Yeah,
else didn't get that, because that's a great amenity to not lose. So
oh, so true. Okay. So I think this leads us to kind of just having a real and honest conversation about maybe something we don't talk
mm,
about a lot, but what we're doing as advisors that maybe is
mm,
unintentionally hurting the relationships, like, right? So maybe it's a mistake that we don't even know we're making, or something that like we're
mhm,
on the hotel side, they're just like literally rolling their eyes. Like, is she
mhm.
really asking for this? Does she really think that
Yeah.
this is what we're doing? What are these things that maybe we're hurting unintentionally the relationships instead of strengthening them?
Oof, interesting question. I mean, I think being overly pushy is
Mhm.
really something. And I also think that, actually, let me think about this a little bit more. I think it's also about us as advisors understanding different cultures.
Mm.
And this is something that I've seen quite a lot from working in Asia, is that, if we approach something in the same way that we would, in the US or in the UK, or what have you, things tend not to get done. When you push too much, people will back off and say, I don't want to do that, or I'm not passing it to the right person, or they just say no. And I think us understanding, first of all, the level of staff that we're talking to. So if it's a reservations agent, we need to remember that they don't, they are exactly what it says. They're a reservations agent, so they're making bookings, they're making sure everything is right and what have you. But to get anything else done, you need to be, getting to a manager or higher. So first of all, knowing the right person to talk to straight away is a huge thing, and having connections at all levels in the property is really important. And if you don't have them, it's asking for them.
Mm.
Because what you don't want to do is put that reservations person in a position where they either just say flat out no, and you say, please escalate this, or you end up going around them. I was actually speaking to an advisor yesterday who was struggling to get something done, and she asked me, is this something to elevate to the GM? And I said, absolutely not. That's not a GM level
Yeah.
thing at all, but you do need to be higher than reservations.
Yeah.
So please ask them, can you please connect me with the sales team? Because a lot of the things that we need doing need approval from sales. And that's another thing that I probably should have said before, when we were talking a little bit about how decisions are made as well. Everything that's done in the property has revenue attached. We also need to remember that. So the more that we push for upgrades, every time, this is not just, oh, sure, let's do that. You've got a revenue manager on your case saying, but I could have sold that room for higher, but now you've given it to somebody. Or you've got a GM saying, hang on a second, we've given 50 upgrades this week. Why? You've got a lot of these things that are being questioned in the background as well. So again, from the hotel perspective, it needs to be a very strategic decision always, whether that decision is based on relationship building or a revenue or future business potential. There's a lot of things that they're thinking about. But definitely, I think a big mistake that a lot of us make is talking to the wrong person.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that we need to understand from the inside out. And that's when our global sales teams can come into their own, because we do have in-market representatives that can get us to the right person. And a lot of the time we spend our efforts talking directly to the hotel, when actually, if we went to the person whose role it is to help us, on our side, then that, stops a lot of friction.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something. But I do think cultural nuances are huge. I've seen it a lot. The Asian staff, for example, they're a lot more sensitive. They're not as direct. They don't like to say no.
Mm.
those sorts of things. So if we go bully in there the same way that we might deal with a more corporate facing property in the US, it's not necessarily going to get things done. So I do think that we need to be sensitive with who we're talking to and where they're based in the world.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And it's funny you say that, like, talking to the right person, because I think even as advisors, either we can do one of two things, right? We could be here, we have our Rolodex of the people we met when they came on the road show
Mhm.
or at the conference, and it's like, this
Yeah.
is the GM and I'm talking to him about like some random, like, bottle of wine that I want my clients to have. And they're like, that is not on his day-to-day
Yeah,
agenda. Right. But it's like,
exactly.
like, oh, I met so-and-so from this hotel. Look, I booked your hotel.
Yeah.
And now can you just this,
Yeah.
amenity to my client, and he's just like,
Yeah.
or
And
to
it's like,
the point about, like, calling and whoever picks up the phone, or emailing and whoever emails back, and you're asking them to do something that is not really in their scope of what they
mm,
do. And, it can go both ways. Either they could be like, no, I have absolutely like no ability to help you with this, or it just doesn't get to the person who actually could help you. And then that's, you know,
exactly.
um, yeah, it's a negative. So I think, yeah,
Mm,
working on how we can have stronger relationships with the right people, and direct our questions to the right people. Is there anything you
mm.
would say like a strong advisor relationship looks like, or what makes the relationship enjoyable, or advisors that can like make themselves stand out in a positive way, in an appropriate way, without kind of overdoing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much support of the properties that are important to you and your business at all levels, really. I think it's definitely about making yourself visible and aware to the global sales team, first of all, or your in-market representatives, depending. A lot of independent properties have sales reps in markets, so making sure that they are aware of who you are and they're your first point of call, because obviously those global sales teams, regardless of how they're set up, they're the eyes and ears on the ground in our market. And they are the ones that will really flag and introduce you as an important advisor to the
Oh,
hotel group or that property, or what have you. They can also tell the sales team, this person actually, she's whatever level advisor within their consortia, X $1 million business, that sort of thing. It also makes them sit up, and it educates the sales team already to know, to know who you are. So that's one level. If you're going to events of that brand as well, obviously making yourself known, but not in a loud way, just more that, hey, we've talked on email already, it's great to put a face with the name. You start to build that personal relationship, and it's not something that happens overnight, but it's very much a networking. You might not need that person or be selling their property for the next 6 months, but you need to nurture those relationships.
mhm.
And then when it comes to more executional level, that is when that person introducing you to the property and showing them that you've made a booking and now you need assistance, that's the clear flow of communication that goes through, so that not only is that sales team aware of your booking, but also the property, it's flagged at the right level at the beginning. And it's that person, it could be the DOSM, it could be the sales director, it could be the one that travels into market, that sort of thing. They are the one that filters your booking through the property to get to the right person. So I think it's very much about having that top level relationship that will then filter down through all the steps that you need. So it's really, yes, our industry is built on relationships with our clients and with properties, but it's also building them in your own market. Because one thing that I was going to say that's probably a little bit off topic, but hotels deal with all different markets, and each market is set up a very different way. So, I've worked the UK market before. It works completely differently to the US. Um, you know, some hotel groups even started to cut off wholesale contracts. So they weren't even allowing travel advisors and DMCs to even have access to their rooms anymore. At one point, they were saying, no, this is not a segment that we need anymore. And that was happening a lot when I was in Asia. And even myself, I will admit this, that I was very skeptical of the value of travel advisors at one point. And my team was saying, oh, but we've been asked by this consortia to give amenities and things, and it was my decision, and I'm really not sure about this and things, because when you sit so far removed from the markets and you've got, a market manager for the Middle East and a market manager for Australia and a market manager for the US, and all those markets work differently, it's a lot for reservations and people who are physically making the bookings to remember and understand. And imagine if someone leaves and then training someone else. I mean, it's a whole thing. So where I'm going with that is that the US is set up so differently to other markets, and there is such a network of travel advisors, and a lot of properties don't understand that. They also don't understand that we're not sitting in one place. So understanding that, someone who's sitting in the middle of Texas, I don't know, could be the biggest generator of business for a certain host agency ever. And those hotels, they can never get hold of that person. They never meet them physically or anything, because it's not set up how it is in their mind. And I think that the US is such a huge market for so many properties, but understanding how to work with us. And I say us because I'm also a US advisor, even though I've got a British accent and I don't sit in the US, but all my clients are from there. And it's a really, really different way of working. So the US is an anomaly in terms of the global way the markets work as well. And US clients travel a very different way than a lot of other markets do. So it's a two-pronged approach. Again, it's having the teams understand how the market works, and also how to look after those clients to the way that they expect to be looked after as well.
Yeah, that is a really, really important distinction. And, I never want, it's a very important thing, I guess, for us in America to remember that it's not just about us, right? And we have a hard time doing that. So let's just put that out there. But it is so true. And it is so important to remember. And I'm really just glad that your understanding of all different sides is able to just kind of shine a light and give insight and perspective on this, because it's not something we get to hear and understand very, very often. And so I think that's just such a really, really cool perspective. And I'm sure that you now as an advisor, but we were talking about how you mentor and you coach other advisors just kind of coming up and finding their way and learning their book of business, but also learning how to present a great client experience, which is something that obviously all advisors are so kind of consumed with. I think that you would have such an interesting and helpful perspective for them to set them up for success, right? Here's maybe something you're not thinking through, but you should.
Yeah.
Or here's what's going to you have those relationships that you desire that are going to pay off long-term. And that's a really, really big benefit, I would say. So it's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's seeing it from all sides has really given, a big perspective. And I think that had I not done everything that I'd done, when I found myself in a position of unemployment, and I really had to pivot. I've never wanted to be a business owner. It's never been on my radar. It was, but I think that having that kind of overall umbrella view of the industry and being able to pick up clients and work with them off the bat without needing to really think, it was a huge thing for me to do. And I think that's how I did manage to build pretty much a referral based business. And I think that, one thing that a lot of advisors coming into the industry, they love travel. They probably have a great network. They hit the ground running. But there's a couple of things that tend to be missing. One is systems, which we all struggle with. Don't get me wrong. I definitely don't have the greatest system in the back of here, but I'm trying my best to refine this year. But I think customer management, client management, and also supplier management are two things that, we've been talking a lot now about supplier communication and how that all works and how to, nurture those relationships. But it also comes down to a client. And I think where a lot of people come unstuck, which is where I really try to help, is how to handle things if something goes wrong. Yeah. Because, a lot of the time things go perfectly and it's amazing and we get great feedback. But there are times when everything just turns upside down. The client's not happy. You have to deal with things on the fly and be able to be very calm in a situation and not panic and know what to do. And at that point, your relationships with any of your suppliers, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a DMC, anything, that is what is going to make or break the next thing that happens. And I think that I've had a great perspective on that from dealing with clients face to face for many years, and not through a screen or through the phone, but very much in front of me and having to find solutions on the spot.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that I think a lot of advisors shy away from, or they struggle with what to do when
Yeah.
those sorts of things happen. So that's definitely, somewhere that I have noticed people come to me for advice.
I would bet, because I mean, you are right in that when you get into this industry and when you get into this role, you quickly realize how much your success is not based on your destination knowledge. It really is about
Exactly.
how you care for your clients and how
Mhm,
you are with them through the good and the bad. When it goes great and everything's perfect and they have the best upgrade and the best view and the best
mhm.
bottle of wine waiting in the room, and
Yeah.
when it all goes to crap and they call you, you pick up the phone and you deal with it.
Yeah.
Those are the things that make loyal clients and that continue to
Mhm.
grow not only your relationship with that particular client, but allow them to refer you as someone trustworthy and worthy of doing business with. And so it is the biggest skill set you can have, I think, as I would just agree with you. So, well, Alexandra,
Yeah.
thank you so much for kind of
It's my
having this
pleasure.
conversation, because I feel like we all learned something, which is and mostly we hopefully learned that it's not about just booking the hotels. It's really about how understanding how both sides operate, how they make decisions, and adjusting how we show up for our clients so that they have the best client experience possible, and focusing on how we communicate, how we position our clients in the right way, and building relationships over time, which is, of course, what this
Definitely.
business is built on. So I appreciate this conversation and I appreciate you having it with me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.